There we are. Great. Okay, so Helen Boyles is our latest author, a writer and educator whose love of literature and the natural world has shaped her career and her recreational choices. She taught English language and literature for many years at secondary and further education level, and for the last 20 years has lectured in humanities with the Open University. You'll notice I'm reading this because I daren't miss any of the important bits. She's got so many things that she does. She has a master's degree and PhD in 18th and early 19th century English literature, and currently she's exploring the relationship between creativity and wild walking in female writers from that period. This ties in with her own love of long-distance walking and the way nature and the reflection it inspires is a source of fulfillment. Helen has two previous collections to this one, both published by Indigo Dreams. Catching Light was published in 2016 and Transitions in 2017. And she's also had poetry printed in journals and anthologies. During 2019, her work appeared in a collection of award-winning poems by the Edward Thomas Fellowship, and her piece on Notre Dame and the way it burned down was translated into French and published in the January 2020 edition of Notre Dame's Œcuménisme Information. She's co-chair of the Devon-based Moor Poets, and I know there are people here tonight from that group, helping to promote and develop poetic talent using workshops in and around Dartmoor. And I can't tell you how much pleasure I've had making this fantastic book with her, which she will talk to you more about in a minute. But right now, over to you, Helen, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Camilla, for that very generous introduction. I'd like to thank everybody who's come along to support me in this event this evening. I really appreciate seeing you there, and I would also like to thank Camilla very much indeed for facilitating this and so generously encouraging the expansion of the work from its slimmer origins. I really appreciate the shared interest really in the values that are promoted by Palewell Press, interest in issues of justice and sustainability, and it's really rewarding for me to find an affinity of outlook with Camilla and her press. I just want to show the cover, which in itself is very striking. I don't know if you can see that all right, but that is an image of literally, carefully, precariously, but apparently securely balanced rocks in Zimbabwe, Harare, Zimbabwe, which Camilla thought would be quite a striking cover. And I'm very impressed by that and by the general quality of production in this edition, which I hope you may all enjoy. Right, so the poems have been written over the last few years, and they're inspired by my experience of walking, my passion for the natural world, my enjoyment of traveling across the world as well as within this country, observing nature, reflecting on our human connections with place, with its wild creatures and with each other over time. And the theme of balancing the elements came to me during the last year when we were trying to balance precariously our lives and our health. And it seemed to me that a number of the poems were also exploring the elemental properties of nature. Many of the poems seem to explore the elemental properties and the connection between them and the need to balance them. So I'm going to divide this into two sections. The first section is focusing on those natural elements of water, air and rock, fire and wood, roughly speaking. And I'm going to select at least one from each of those areas. I thought I would start with the element of water, and specifically sea, because it's something that I love to look out on and to swim in. And I know some of you are keen sea swimmers as well. And I thought this section will generally focus on our relationship with both elements and wild creatures. And this was a very interesting experience I had a couple of years ago, swimming in a local bay when we encountered some creatures who live in the sea there. So it's called seal shadow. We had to ride the waves rolling to surf on easterlies that afternoon. Let it take us loose-limbed from the routine day to empty us in water's lift and pull, frayed edge of salt air on the tongue, antiseptic sting on skin. The water grows opaque and strange as we swim farther out, our floating star-shaped bodies newly luminous. Smooth weight, cool curve beneath our legs, a rounding, curling, silken pressure sliding by us, gone. Sleek stroke on belly, thigh, a gentle buffeting, then gone. Now a twist of shadow and a mottled silver gleam of head breaks surface, rises up and holds our startled gaze in whiskered curiosity. There and there again emerges, and with nostril flare and liquid eye, another bullet dark head periscopes. They observe as if remembering, as if greeting after absences. We speak, they listen. In our raised heads, we hold a shared space, see ourselves mirrored in dark pools of folk memory, metamorphosed into selkie, joined in yearning for the freedom of this element. Quick swerve and deep dive follows us with breathing grunts and sighs beneath our flexing feet, voice, limbs melding in a braid of breath and current out beyond the marker buoys, till watching cliffs summon us back. Sea shrinks to shore, and we return to struggle over stones on land feet, shake off spray and scent, draw on human skin and fiber coats as our seal shadow slips away, melts to the wide bay, strands us on a dry shore, bruised by light. The second one I'm going to read is another adventure, an encounter with wild creatures in New Zealand this time, which we visited recently to explore and to visit my brother-in-law, who has lived there for some time now. And this was a wonderful privilege to be taken out in a boat to encounter the largest marine bird that roams the oceans, the albatross. It reminded me that the title, Asking Forgiveness of the Albatross, is suggested by the connection with Coleridge's Ancient Mariner, and of course the fateful shooting of the albatross, which made the winds to blow. Fateful shooting for no apparent reason, and it seems quite significant that this is our often pointlessly destructive response to the natural world, which we wanted to make up for. So this is Asking Forgiveness of the Albatross. We perched this morning on the bright shore for a first encounter with age-old denizens of earth and myth. Seasoned skipper, sea and bird-wise, great respecter of the Queen and partnership of Commonwealth, meets and greets, then cuts a clean path out into the bay's wide glittering. Beyond, a stride of peaks climb white against skies abalone. Below, a silver scroll of mist, and now from there glide giants on great wings growing towards us, another kingdom opening. Angels carved in ebony and ivory, they beat their slow flight through a dance of fairy petrel playing air and spume to congregate and claim the rich gift trailing from the stern. Accept our peace offering. Their heraldic heads are heavy with the knowledge of other lands and distances, the thousands of sea miles traveled in their parenting. We feel humbled that they condescend to visit us. This is a new world, We have learned from the errors of the old, or so we like to think, distance ourselves from the predations of the hunting, whaling days. So we welcome, feed the albatross, and it speeds us through the sunlit foam, wide wings steadying our way. The next one is exploring the element of rock. And again, it's in New Zealand, and we had been told about this amazing colony of glowworms that were tucked at the end of a sort of old abandoned railway cutting in a really quite obscure and remote part of the countryside in New Zealand. We'd been told about this by the man who ran the little hostel where we were staying that night, and he had all these secret places he knew about. Anyway, this was the glowworm. So the comments are the man who ran the hostel. That's the direct speech parts. So this is glowworms, kakahi. You can't see them from here, but they are there. And he pointed down the tunnel of the abandoned railway cutting at the end of a forgotten track. No, believe me, they're there in their thousands. Go and see. So I returned along the path between the sheared rock face, shaggy with fern, and in its secret dark, it was as if the sky had slipped and emptied all its stars into that one space, catching as they fell on leaves and fronds, snagging on jagged edges and in cracks where they chinked their brilliance. When you looked up from below, they jeweled the roof of caves and crevices. I knew the stars were hungry larvae snaring prey with sticky iridescent threads, but for us, they were a shining festival. You have to stand and face them, he had said. If you look at them obliquely, they will fade. Turn aside, they disappear. And so I faced them and was filled with wonderment. As I gazed, more and yet more opened their eyes to mine till I was circled in their shimmering. Yes, when I saw, I could accept the miracle, but as the lights went out one by one when I returned and left them at my back and the path shrunk to distance, it was as though they'd never been. So it was just quite a magical experience. I'm moving now into the element of air, sky, and space. And space is a significant word there because we're conscious of the declining number of hirundines coming each year. And in our village, and certainly not far away, it was one of the great sights of the summer was the swooping silhouettes of the swallows over the fields just by where we lived. Our dog used to chase them without any success. And my little daughter, she was used to carry her on my back around the field. She would be delighted by these birds. They would line up on the telegraph wires and chatter together, and then they'll be off again. And year by year, the numbers have declined. We used to have martins in the village, nesting under the eaves opposite. In the last few years, they haven't returned. And it's a sadness, it's a great sadness, and it's a source of great concern. And I know at a distance, there are terrible traps set out. So say on the Mediterranean North African coast, there are 700 kilometers of mist nets there to catch migrating birds, and then they're served up as delicacies in restaurants. Now, I know there are increasing concerns about this, and there are efforts to address this. But anyway, it's a bit of a grief. And this year we've just seen a very, very few swallows. They're quite precious when we see them, but they're quite a few. So this is an emptying. Is the world still turning to and from the sun, from sleep to day on its diurnal tilt, but always tipping back to spring? Is it still turning? It is May, and there are no swallows, no racing shapes above us scissoring the sky. Maybe the world has stiffened on its axis, frozen our winged messengers, and thieves wait at the gates of their escape, smothering their dance in mists of net. Their sky shapes are the arrows of our faith, speeding out and back again to the heart's home. They center us. Through summer, we would see them dip to the water's brim, scoop up the light, see them flicker in a corner of the eye, the reds and blues of courting dress, hear them gossip on the wires and eaves. Now the eye reflects the sky's blank, mirrors an emptying, and the voiceless spaces of the dawn and evening are a kind of death. So that's quite a sad reflection on the swallows. The next poem again is Air and Space. And this was a poem that was inspired by an outing that our daughter had arranged for us to Kielder Observatory in the forest in Northumberland, the Kielder estate. It's actually combined a little bit with another experience we had in New Zealand of a fantastic view of night skies and the Milky Way. So it's a sort of melding of two, but I have called it Kielder. Last lights thin and melt behind us as we motor into space that slowly spreads to forest, deepening to dark along the coils of an empty road. We tunnel through strangeness, silence, to a final opening. Stands of black trees wait, watch where great eyes lapped in metal within shuttered frames rear, slowly revolve. They are looking at something else outside our pinched horizons, another dark, lights from otherwhere shimmering their veils across the black. Clambering onto the scaffolding, we gaze up through the giant lens of gods, see the shining of our origins and destinies in scatterings of particles, a cosmic circumvolve. See, we are here, we are there, we have been, will be something other than we know, swelling and dying through infinities of memory. Around us, the forest is prowling with shapes flung up in constellations. Wolves will be stalking here, they say, before too long. The pad of their night hunt sounds in our blood. With them, we raise our heads, float outside ourselves, hail from some drowned source the clear ring of the stars. And to the two Coleridgians who are here, I don't know if you recognized or remembered the word circumvolve, which Coleridge invented for the wheel of the stars. So there's a Coleridgian word there. One from the section on woods and forest was inspired by a painting in Teignmouth Art Gallery as part of a collaborative conversation between artists and poets, which took place over 3 separate years. And I forget the precise theme of this one, but artists would contribute their images and perhaps post them online, and poets would respond. And then eventually an exhibition combining the wonderful images that the artists had produced and the poetic responses was presented in the gallery in Teignmouth Art Centre. So this is inspired by an image of a woman in a sort of tropical context. So it suggested to me Amazon, the Amazon rainforest. Amazon. She folds rain curtains round herself, lets it shine her skin, mist off her back to steaming earth and dripping leaf. She has been here for millennia, first coiled in the roots of the great trees, in swaying branches loosening her limbs, from tangled tresses spilling fruit and seed. In stippled sunplay, she takes on the camouflage of jaguar, melts and glows with a chameleon, moved to the lazy swing of sloth, drowsing in the dripping silence between rains. She steadies to the slow tread of the pachyderm. Panther pads the shadows to the drinking pool. Now she is stalked by other predators that envy her embrace of water, leaf, and stone, the rhythms of her spreading and her gathering. Their dull roar builds, blades slash the sacramental light. She folds the mysteries of praise within herself, returns to curl again in earth, thin to the flow of sap, still her pulse in waiting for another summoning. So that obviously is acknowledging the threat to the Amazon rainforest at the moment. Now, I move into a second section. It's taken from a section which I've headed Balancing, which is focused perhaps more on our human connection and independence with natural elements, and the challenge to retain the balance, a physical and emotional equanimity, really, of our human lives. And I've set it within a sort of generally historical context. I think it just strikes me that so much of maintaining of our human balance involves recognizing our independency with nature and natural forces and exploring the spiritual resonances of these. I'm going to start with a poem that's set very early in human history, the precarious establishing of our human lives in long time, deep time. So this is Song of the Bones. So perched on the mind's bridge, we are there, or were once clinging to the edge of things. I can see us small on the shore, trawling the sea for nourishment, piling ornamentally the carapace of feasts. Until the seas rose, engulfed our marine gardens, we scoured the sands, followed the herds, used all of a kill to keep and clothe ourselves. Light and dark swung their cycles round us, guided us to work and sleep. Then the warming and silting of earth, march of the trees, clearing of trees and forest settlements. We circled and announced our space with ditches, bunds, rocks, dug out and carved the flint to whittle blades for weaponry, chinked their napping in the open glades as smoke curled up. Our hands were small, but thousands over hours, days, years raised monuments, heaved histories. Voices could call, feet tramp over distances, scenting the earth for treasure to exchange and store. We turned with the solstice, in rough pillars carved subtly angled apertures and passages to catch and hold the sun. Silent still spill on stone, a faith distilled, trembles against eclipse. So that was the attempt to catch the sun and hold the sun. And moving on through early time, again, this is inspired by an archaeological discovery, which you may well have heard about. In the late 1980s in Vedbæk, Denmark, a Mesolithic tomb was discovered, which contained the bodies of a young mother and a newborn baby, enfolded in a swan's wing. So it's called Swan's Wing Burial. Neither had survived the journey through pain and labor to the day. At its threshold slipped away, but mother and newborn had been gathered, laid together in the kind dark of the earth, kerneled there in waiting for rebirth. Curled round them, soft as morning cloud, was a swan's wing, just one white embrace, folding their sleep in a mute suspense. The sky bent over them, mists wrapped them round, held them secret in their slow time till the opening to shock of spade and light. It seemed the mother and her child had rocked a long way on the swan's wing to this shore, to be uncovered finally by probing eyes and implements, spread of bird wings shrunk to quills, an offering for scientific scrutiny of shredded fabric, bones and shells. It felt a sacrilege to lift them from their bed, to separate and reassemble them. Some shed a tear at this late point in time to see their helplessness. But they had long since taken flight, been lifted to another light upon the swan's great pinions. Strong and sure had climbed above the earth, the water skin, into the sky on its broad back, trailing their garments, far from generation's drag. Now, wondering, they look back at our huddled selves, here, small, puzzled, staring down. This poem was inspired by, the next poem was inspired by a visit to the home of Emily Bronte in Haworth, where I was doing some research in the Bronte Haworth parsonage into the walking of women writers from that era, the later Romantic era. And also it combines the image of the sky dancing hen harrier, which a couple of family members told me they had seen above some northern moorland near where they live. That's Joe and Marcus. I think you saw this and were impressed by the amazing dance, courting dance of the hen harrier, which tragically is persecuted by those who want to preserve the grouse and the grouse moors. So there are very few of them left on our northern moors. It's a real privilege to see them. Now, these two images were combined in this poem: sky dancer above Haworth, bird and woman. Emily specifically. Grouse startled from our feet, burst on the stillness, their alarm. Go back, go back, go back. Harsh against the brittle edge of heather stems, cold rasp air grazed the black burnt furrows of the hunting field. We intrude on their fastnesses, eyes gleam in coverts warily. But if we strip sense, we can find home, self in the coarse roots, dark earth, drifting sky. Memories are laid down here, sleep under skies and wind. In night spaces, starlight penetrates the secret script of peat and rock. Sudden, there, a dazzle lift and spread of wings in bright clap of triumphant flight, clean on the moor's height, soaring on thermals, hangs, falls, rises, turns, swoops down and climbs again. Sky dancing, pinion powered, persecuted bird, courts light. Her rare spirit rises up each time we crest that view. Ink stippled pages flutter from her outstretched arms. Cloud flaps a cloak around her spare frame as head into the wind, she beats the miles with her bold stride, eyes trained on shining levels here and further off, scorns discomfort, danger, wet, half savage, hardy, free. And that last line is a description of Catherine Earnshaw from Wuthering Heights, as some of you may have recognized. They just seem to blend into each other. Emily with her affinity with the natural world and her love of wild birds. Now, moving through time, I have written a poem which was again focusing on human balancing in a tragic context of the Aberfan disaster in the 1960s. I remember fairly vividly as a child at primary school, being the same age as the children who lost their lives in this tragedy, and my friend Norma Casewell from school coming into and telling me with a pale face what she had heard about the collapse of the slag heap on the little primary school in Aberfan. And it really affected us in a way. We identified with the children who were the same age as ourselves. So this is the voices of Aberfan. Through years unburdening, the slag black mountain inched up the window panes of classrooms at its base. In daily chanting of times tables, alphabets, it could be ignored, shut behind blinds. Warnings to industrial authorities could be ignored. But it stalked playground games with its dark watch, muffled the treble flights of skipping rhymes, mounted in corners of the mind. Its voice came out eventually as pressure shifted its slow sleep. First, a trickle hush of ash in its blind core, a struggling breath. Then, as balance edged to spill, a creaking, faint complaint grew to grumble, thickened to a low growl, swelled. I felt it roar, she said, build and build to thunder, break. And then the most horrible silence I have ever heard. And that was an actual remark by a woman from the village that was recorded at the time. Now the next poem is another poem that was suggested by a painting, and it was part of a workshop which was led by a poet friend who has very sadly recently died. He was a talented painter as well as a poet, and his workshops were always quite inspiring. The images he produced as stimulus, and this was a painting that you'll probably, a number of you, be familiar with, by Lowry, of a man lying on a wall, just laid out on a wall in the town Manchester, which inspired it. So there's a comic element to it. We were asked by Graham, who led this workshop, to imagine what the view might have been from the other side of the wall, or a different perspective on the man from the wall, because it was just a low wall beside the pavement, and yet the other side of the wall you saw the upper part of a cathedral and the upper part of a factory, and I thought sort of potentially the wall could go down quite a way. So anyway, I explored that idea. And it seemed also to suggest the character of Graham himself, who's a very self-contained, calm sort of man. It alarmed me when I glanced up from my path beside the factory towards the church, glanced up by chance and saw stretched out full length on the wall a man suspended, as it seemed, in space above a plunging drop. I shut my eyes and looked again to verify, but there he was, outside the frame of usual or possible. Down here I felt helpless, small, while others passed me by, heads down and heavy-footed, never looking up. Was it only I who saw him there? I wanted to call out, but no, too dangerous to startle him and make him slip. Had he reached a path he couldn't take? Were obstacles too large to overcome? Was he balancing precarious between his life and the unknown, sought the release of nothingness, 1 foot on the edge? But no, he was not balanced nervously. Nothing desperate about him there. Indeed, he looked quite calm, just like a recumbent king or bishop in the church ahead. At first I feared for him and then admired his careless fortitude, the simple stepping off the tracks, the lying down and staring up, oblivious. And all around me, people hurrying with bowed heads, clumsy-footed, dragging their bags, their little dogs, seeing nothing but the ground, while he stretches out above them, staring at the sky, shoes pointing up, floating on the drift of his poised cigarette, away from rush and hurry to another place. The next poem is inspired by my compulsively restless and active daughter, who used to go to handstand classes and then post her feats of handstanding on Facebook. And she is a restless character, and enjoying life, entering in fully into the joys of the natural world, as I bring out in the poem. So, handstander. Buoyed on energy, upturned, you spring into dilated space, defy constraints. You are circus artiste, wild child, proud of your agility. Upside down, your eyes graze grass, your feet brush cloud. You cycle with the sun, draw new angles and perspectives with the turning compass of your legs. Then you embrace another element and slipping in the day's cool skin, thread and spread your limbs to water's flow, melt to fish and otter pelt, borrow mayfly shimmer, catkin dust, ride the current downstream, pushing it back up to shore, curl out and shake yourself. You will not be grooved on trammeled lines, sealed in a synthetic blinking box. You can only sit so long. You stretch the walls with your impatient mind, spin imagination's coin out onto the dazzle of the waiting sea, the unmade road. Now, the last poem is suggested by another visit to my daughter and walk with Miriam along the Northumbrian coast where she lives. Difficult time, difficult year. We'd been talking, supporting each other and talking, and this just sums up really our reflections on the year and the future. The sea. Wild and dark the night sea, rearing on grey, breaking on white to flood the shore, withdraw to leave its shining face, the glisten of our melting steps. Walkers moving steadily, dog with lighted collar skittering ahead, just visible. We talk of floating things, of challenges, of how to find that core of calm, headland flashing back the lighthouse beam to warn of twisting currents in our passages. We loop and return, sand prints in our wake dissolving to the prowling shapes and yelps of foxes in the dunes, squeal of ambushed prey, thin bird calls from the rocks, muffled bass of the sea's voice, breathing in the emptied space. And I'll end with that one.
Well, I am completely mesmerized. I'm sitting here in a kind of trance. I would love it if all of you could unmute now so we can applaud this extraordinary collection. And thank you very much for your patience in not doing it before. And thanks for all the wonderful points in the chat room, which I will share with Sue later because she won't have time to look at everything now. But let's give her a round of applause. Marvelous stuff. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for everyone who's come. Now, if anyone would like to talk, wave. I'm going to put the view back onto gallery view so I've got more chance of seeing you. You can use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen if you have a PC to raise a kind of virtual hand, or you can simply wave your hand and start talking, and I'm absolutely fine. Sue, do you want to start the ball rolling?
Hi, thank you. Helen, that was lovely. And I'm interested that your collection expanded itself organically, it sounds like, as you were working on it with Camilla. How did that work? Did you just, I imagine you had a core body of poems, and then as you started to work on bringing them into the book, others just sort of caught your eye, or was there a more logical and less intuitive way of bringing them in?
Well, originally I submitted just a smaller selection, anticipating a pamphlet, and Camilla responded positively to those and asked me for some more. I just assumed it would remain smallish, but I think one of the problems is that my poems tended to overlap onto 2 pages. It expanded that way, but then Camilla was quite generously suggested that I could submit some others if I wanted to. And I did find, looking over the poems, that a number of them did seem to fit the category of balancing and that interdependent human and natural or animal relationship, and so a number seemed to be fairly compatible. And I just offered them as suggestions, and she felt that it worked, that it expanded and gave and perhaps strengthened it a little, you know, gave it more force and more variety. But it's interesting, you don't quite know what themes you've been exploring until you look reflectively at some of your poems and think, yes, okay, that seems to be running through a number of them. And then maybe there are more correspondences than I realized. And
I think it also says something about your title. The title of your book, I think, lends itself to bringing things in, actually.
I suppose it does. Yeah, things you might not have thought would fit. Somehow, yeah, you realize there are correspondences. Yeah.
I mean, it's very close to the values of Palewell Press. The idea of human rights and human self-realization is deeply dependent on the environment that you live in. You know, do you have enough to eat? Do you have enough space? Are people giving you love? Have you been given a good start in life? And I felt that the second half of Helen's collection expressed what I want to express about the fact that we are children of the world and we step away from it at our peril. And the sense of balance that she brings into so many of her poems is really essential.
Thank you. Balance and interconnectivity with each other and with our environment, absolutely. It's crucial to fulfillment, happiness, and yeah, balance. Yeah.
I'm very pleased you ended up with the sea. I feel that's where I wanted to end the collection. I just felt it really did say what I needed to say, or what I needed someone to say.
I thought, yeah, and it balanced because you got sea to start with and sea at the end as well. And again, when you look out to the sea, and there are the possibilities and the other horizons to lift your thoughts and your mind beyond the immediate constraints and beyond the constraints imposed obviously by the COVID crisis as well. You look out to other possibilities and other countries, you know, and other people, and yeah, beyond the immediate.
So is there anyone else who would like to ask anything or comment? There's some lovely things in the chat room, but feel free to wave a hand if you want to and ask anything or say anything. But yes, Peter. Hello there.
Hello.
Hello,
Helen. There were really lovely moments and lovely big pictures too. But it's one particular tiny little moment that I'm relishing. Now, I'll change it tomorrow when I read the whole book, but at the moment it's the kindness of darkness. The kind dark.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a fabulous expression. Yeah.
Well, I find a lot of peace and safety in darkness. I enjoy the walking in the dusk and in the dark, and you possibly do as well, Peter, don't you? You wrote a poem that was inspired by the Dark Lane. Is that right?
Yeah.
By Dark Lane. And yes, I don't know why darkness has had negative associations. It's very unfortunate because it can be it represents safety and closeness and.
You meant the tomb as well, but as if it were your home, your destination, not something to be feared.
Yeah.
That was fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah, I do certainly find that. As a child, I had to have the room in darkness. I don't know if anybody else is the same. The room had to be dark, but there needed to be a tiny chink of light under the door so that I knew there were people outside. I knew my parents were outside, and you could hear the bath water being run.
Mm.
You could sometimes hear the theme music of the Archers. But I had to have the room dark otherwise, and I felt safe in that dark, but knowing there were people outside. So interesting.
I think it's a shame that it's so difficult to get to a dark place.
Oh, it is. It is.
I mean, I did some time on Skoma looking after the birds.
Right.
And there you can be dark, and you can walk alone down a dark track.
On the end of Pembrokeshire.
And
yeah.
So those sorts of experiences have stayed with me. And I remember when in Cancer Ward, when Solzhenitsyn was writing about the experience of having been completely surrounded by arc lights and searchlights and so on while he was in exile and while he was in hospital being treated for cancer, and he finally gets away from it all and just lies on his back and looks up at the sky, and how free he felt at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, the harsh sort of interrogative lights, you can't escape. It's so difficult. The dark sky experience of Kielder as well was special. The dark sky experience of New Zealand was very special, and it is more and more difficult to experience that. Yeah, it's light pollution obviously is a significant, but yeah, it's such an interesting topic that
it is.
Yeah. There's the safety, the safety you can feel in that. But light, it's seen as something negative, isn't it? Obviously, it can be light deprivation. But I wanted to say something else about darkness, and it's escaped my mind now, I'm afraid. Never mind.
Well, you'll probably wake up at 3 in the morning and think there's another poem. No, that's really good. Are there any more people who want to talk? Just let me know. And no? Okay, well, I think it's been the most extraordinary evening, and we have it all recorded, so those people who couldn't make it to the event will be able to watch it on YouTube. And I would like to thank all of you very, very much for coming and giving up time and sitting with me through this very special experience. And a big, big thank you to Helen for being here and sharing her poems with us. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much to everybody for coming and listening to that. It means makes all the difference to be able to share like this.
Yes, I only wish we could have done what someone was saying, why, we could all have murmured gently, what's sometimes called the Ledbury hum or something like that.
Oh, that's great.
But I just wasn't sure that people would realize how their noise interfered, and so I kept you all on mute. But it was a lovely evening, and thank you very, very much. Anyway, I'll say good night now, and please feel free to buy the book. If you want to find a link for buying it, look in the chat room and you will find, I think, about 4 chats before the end. You'll find it says how to buy at the launch discount. It's just a small discount at the moment, 20%. But don't worry if you don't manage to buy it before Monday. You can still buy it off our website, but that's just a chance to buy it at a slightly lower price. And I have lots of copies, and I'm looking forward to sending them out to the people who've already ordered, and look forward to hearing your feeling and your feedback on it. Anyway, good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you. It's been lovely.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Congratulations, Helen. Good night.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great to see you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
So how do you leave a message?